Welcome to 216, a link to the Past Randomizer podcast. I am your host, Free Agent. Today on the show, we've got JamesFnX. I think James does a good job of describing this episode at the end when he calls it a therapy session. Relate a lot to James. We have a lot of the same struggles and issues and things that we deal with, and it was super relatable and an easy conversation. I really enjoyed it. I think you will too, so that's coming up. Week 4 of the league just started. The most stressful week for me as a person that doesn't run spoiler. Luckily, I've got a good team. I'll be piloting both Shireen and Gamachu. The race with Gamma is on Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern. We're also playing the Drifters, the Fender Runner Drifters, which is really tough. Gamma will be playing Jet, and then Shireen will face Wall Kicks with Megawatt piloting both of them. So the toughest team to face in the division, and we get them in a week that's pretty stressful. Piloting is fun, but not my favorite thing to do. It's hard. It's really hard. Teams 4 and 2 tied for second place with the Fender Runner Drifters. So that tie is going to be broken this week. JKLOL is killing it with the 5-1 record. So they're in first place right now in our division. I've been jamming out to Baldur's Gate 3. I just completed the main story. I've got, according to Steam, 138.9 hours into the game. I loved it. It really was what I was looking for when it comes to an RPG, more so than the Final Fantasy games. And it's not fair to compare Baldur's Gate 3 to Final Fantasy 4. And Final Fantasy 4 was fun. I will get to some of the other SNES RPGs, but Baldur's Gate, it was just so much fun. And even having finished it, there's a ton of stuff I know that I missed. And the replayability is super high because I want to try different classes. I want to try making different decisions. I know the main story will probably go the way that it went. But the main story was actually like the thing that I cared about the least. I was so much more interested in the side quests and all the different side adventures and all the character stuff than I was the main story, especially when it comes to the final act of Act 3. I enjoyed it. I really liked the final act, but all the other stuff, all the character stuff was way more interesting to me. And the fact that I know that there's certain sections of the map that I just never went to. There's certain side quests that I never found. There's bosses that I never fought. There's so much content. And so I finish it and I know I'm going to want to go back and play some more. It's just super fun. I've had so much fun with it. SGL is just around the corner. I've got a month until we fly out. I'll be there on Wednesday the 8th, and then the tournaments run from the 9th through the 12th, and then I'll be leaving on Monday the 13th. I'll be playing in the Link to the Past Randomizer tournament. That's the only tournament that I'm going to attempt. I don't even know any other tournaments that I would think about attempting, but I don't plan to go very far. So I imagine I'll get knocked out and then just get to hang out and do commentary and eat food and hang out and meet everyone. So don't be afraid to say something to me. I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a really good time. And we're close to wrapping up season 4. So got this episode today with James, and then next week is our season finale with Allison. And then I'm going to be off for the rest of the year. There's not going to be any more regular 216 podcasts for the rest of this calendar year. The earliest season 5 would be in January, but I have no plans yet for what's going to happen in the future. I do have some stuff cooking, but when it's ready, I don't know. So we'll see. Just kind of keep an eye on the feed. But next week will be the final episode of season 4. And it's been a long one. Like, I put a lot of time and effort into season 4. 24 regular season episodes is a lot, especially when I didn't even know if the show was going to continue at past episode 4 of the season. I thought that was probably going to be the end. But I got a second wind, and I've had so many people on. And it's been super fun. And then we've done like the bonus episodes with the drafts. And then we had all the Tark stuff that we did. And I need a little bit of break. There's been a lot of 216 content over the last few months. So for the rest of October, November, and December, I would say just, keep your feet active, and then we'll see if we can pop some stuff in there. And then season 5 comes when season 5 comes. I'm not sure when. I want to thank everyone for listening and sticking with the show, though. I really appreciate it. I feel like I found my place in the community. I feel like I found my place with racing. I think I'm in like that sweet spot where I'm just happy to be here, and it's been fun. So really appreciate everyone taking the time to listen to 216. But let's get to today's guest. We've got JamesFnX. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, feels almost like a therapy session. We talk a lot about approach, about feel, about emotion, about all the things around Link to the Past, but not necessarily Link to the Past Randomizer. We talk a little bit about it, and it was therapeutic. It was really good for both me and for James. So let's get to it. Here's JamesFnX. All right, James, super excited to have you on the show. I haven't had a lot of people from the Northwest, but you are a fellow Washingtonian, and just glad to chat with you and kind of get to know you more. I wish we were in person with how close we are, but even though we are both in Washington, still pretty far away. So thanks for coming on the show, man. I'm really happy you're here.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, I think people see Washington and think Seattle, and I am from Seattle, but you are in like basically a different state.
It's yeah. I mean, especially when you look at like the New England states, right? Like everything is so close together. Like you can get from state to state to state, no problem, pretty quickly. But Washington is one of the bigger ones, it feels like, and we're spread. We're quite a bit spread out. So
yeah, you're like 4.5 hours away, and you have seasons, and I don't.
That's true. It's weird that we're in the same state, and it is literally so different. Like the east side and west side of Washington are so dramatically different. So yeah, so excited to have you here and kind of get to know you. I know we've chatted, we've done comms before. I don't know if we've really raced much. I feel like our times racing have been different. Like I know you were playing, then you kind of stepped away, and then you kind of came back. And
yeah, I don't think I've ever really like raced you 1v1. We may have been in the same larger race in some of the weekly, SG weekly era days, but no, I don't think we've had a lot of direct interactions. I've never really been at the same skill level. Like I'm someone who is fairly pessimistic about my own skill level, but also kind of realistic. I'm kind of a fourth quartile, fifth quartile guy if you're looking at main tournament finishes and qualifiers. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be very rare when I come across someone at your caliber on the ladder or something. When you were racing the ladder a fair bit.
Do you race the ladder?
I have not touched the ladder a lot recently. It just hasn't fit in my schedule. My life schedule has changed over the last year and a half.
Okay.
I'm engaged now, which is something that
awesome.
Yeah, it's something that I didn't really expect to be in the position ever, but
sure. Yeah. So am I right in saying that you played for a while and then you kind of stepped back?
It comes and goes. I've taken breaks here and there for a couple of months, but I started playing in 2017.
Okay, so before I did, then yeah.
Yeah, I was looking back when you asked me to do the show. I was looking back at my Facebook history and to try and see when I started playing, because I knew I was already in deep before the big Andy Christos AGDQ 2018 race.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like it was September of 2017, somewhere around there.
Okay.
I was in the secondary tournament that year for the fall. That's before Challenge Cup.
Pre-Challenge Cup, yeah. Okay. So did they have qualifiers for that then? You just didn't qualify? Is that?
No, I didn't even try to qualify. I just entered the secondary tournament.
Okay. So where did you find Link to the Past then? Like, how did you even come across it? The randomizer, that is.
I had been watching GDQs for a long time, since like 2012, 2013. And I had followed some runners for games that I liked. One of them was Andy. He had done, before Randomizer came in, he had done several GDQ Link to the Past events, reverse boss order, and various other glitch modes, and then also an NMG race in AGDQ 2017. And I started following his stream, saw the randomizer. A couple of friends of mine were also watching Andy stream and also watch speedruns and things like that. We're like, this looks really cool. You want to try it? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. This sounds like fun. So I started playing it, found it to be an enjoyable time, and then started looking for races.
Nice. Okay. So when you first started playing, that was on SRL. Or were you just playing against your friends that were interested as well? Or was it even against? Was it just like, let's play together sort of thing?
You play a few seeds, so you make sure like you remember actually how the game works. Because I hadn't played Link to the Past since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And so after I had finished a few seeds and I knew that wasn't going to lose locations, wasn't going to kind of lose my way, because that's even pre easily accessible map trackers.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think at that point it was just like cross products web tracker.
Mm-hmm.
Was the big thing to be using. So you had to know where all the checks were and kind of have all that stuff memorized. But after getting a little bit of confidence, I did start racing on SRL. I don't even remember. I think I haven't checked the SRL. My first race in SRL is sometime in 2017, and they're all bad. They're all very bad.
So did you grow up playing Link to the Past?
Yeah, I've had video games as part of my life since I was a toddler, really.
Okay. Did you grow up in Seattle? Is that where
I did.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you've been there your whole life then?
Yeah.
So you said you were playing since you were a toddler video games?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My family had like, I don't know if you remember the Radio Shack computer, the TRS-80.
I don't. They put their own computer out, Radio Shack did?
They put it out with Tandy. Yeah.
Okay.
So I had that and had a few games for that. And then later on, I picked up a Commodore 64 and had a disk drive and a ton of totally legally acquired games.
Of course. Of course.
So I've had computers and gaming in my life, all my life.
Well, like when this computer that you first had, how old are you talking about? Like, are you 3 or 4?
I think I had it when I was like, 4 or 5.
Okay, and you actually remember that stuff?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think it was 84 or 85. I'm 42.
Okay.
So yeah, I've had games, computers, consoles, video games, card games. I've had that in my life as far back as I can remember.
So I take it your parents were into it as well, because I don't feel like you buy a computer when you're that young unless your parents are also using it.
Yeah, my parents are very much into were very much into technology then.
Sure.
My mom learned programming, learned COBOL at college. My dad had, even before that computer, had another home personal computer. So they were both very much, he was into ham radio CB as well. So
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. You see like the progression, right? Like that's sort of like the pre-computer, nerdy stuff to get into before computers make it even more accessible.
Exactly.
So did you guys have a NES then?
Yeah. The first gaming dedicated thing I had was a Game Boy.
Oh, okay.
But got a NES shortly after that.
Mm-hmm.
And then Super Nintendo, and I then jumped over to PlayStation because I was a Square fanboy.
Well, when you started with the Nintendo and the Game Boy,
mm-hmm.
Did you have a decent library? Were you playing them a lot, or was it more of a casual thing? Or I don't know. Tell me about your experience with that.
I had probably 20 some odd games for both of them.
Okay. Any favorites that you can remember?
On the Game Boy, the Final Fantasy Legend games.
On the Game Boy?
Yeah.
There's a Final Fantasy Legends game on the Game Boy?
There are 3 of them.
Wow. So are they ports or are they?
They are actually
originals?
Part of a different series. They're part of the Saga series.
Okay.
They are the first 3 games in the Saga series.
Okay.
And there's also a game called Final Fantasy Adventure, which in Europe is called Mystic Quest.
Okay.
But that is the first game in the Mana series.
Okay.
They just because Final Fantasy was successful on the Nintendo, they just brought everything over on the Game Boy with the Final Fantasy title because they knew that would sell. Sure.
Is it different than like the NES Final Fantasies, or is it pretty much the same style?
It's turn-based RPGs, but they're much more about different character types gain stats differently.
Okay.
And you can set your party between 4 different character types.
Mm-hmm.
The third Final Fantasy Legend game is a lot more like other Final Fantasies, where it's a lot more your party's fixed as in what you get, but you can change their you can eat monster food, or you can install monster parts or robot parts to change yourself from a human to a cyborg or to a beast or whatever. And those things have different stats and different abilities. That's kind of the gimmick, is that some of your characters can kind of change form. But that they're very similar to Final Fantasy.
So you got into role-playing games very young then.
Yes.
Were you playing the Final Fantasy games on the NES too?
I did not have Final Fantasy for the NES. I had Dragon Warrior 2.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember that.
But yeah, I was into JRPGs. I was into adventure games. I had Link's Awakening on the Game Boy. I had Zelda 2 was actually my first Zelda.
Oh, okay.
On the NES.
Did you like Zelda 2, or do you still like Zelda 2, or what's your opinion?
I think Zelda 2 would be way more beloved and way more remembered if it just wasn't sold as a Zelda game. I think there are flaws in combat. I think you can't say there aren't flaws in combat, but I think it's a very good game that just got harmed by the translation and harmed by the fact that people had expectations based on Zelda 1.
Translation how? Like
both Zelda 1 and Zelda 2 are the translations to get the player information that they're supposed to be getting from talking to NPCs. The translations are just terrible.
So that's why it's like worthless to talk to people in Zelda 2.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. The combat though, I mean, like, just make the sword a little bit longer, right? Yeah. Like, it feels like, I think it was also super punishing that you lose all your XP when you die, like when you game over, I mean.
Yes, those are the two big issues.
Yeah.
But having the 2D combat and having the up slash down slash things like that was all really cool stuff.
Yeah, I think it's like so close to being a good game. I think that's what's frustrating about it, is it's like it's so close to being good, like really good, I think. So you went back and played the first Zelda 2 when you were a kid, or did you only have Zelda 2? Or did you go back and play Zelda 1, or did you only have Zelda 2?
I only had Zelda 2. I think we rented Zelda 1 at one point, and I played a bit of it, but we never got it.
Okay. So when it came to the SNES, was it more RPGs? Was A Link to the Past a part of that?
It was mostly Link to the Past, Final Fantasy 3, Chrono Trigger, Super Mario RPG. So
it's fair to say that you enjoy the RPG genre of video games.
I did back then, yes.
Okay. You did. Oh, okay.
A lot of them have not aged well, unfortunately. The gameplay style in general has not aged well for me.
Can you explain that a little bit? Because I'm just now getting into the JRPG stuff, and my experience with 4 has been pretty fun, but I played the Pixel remaster, which has some, I'm told, quality of life changes.
It does.
And even with just playing it on its own, I feel like I didn't understand what was going on. It felt like I had to stream and I had to have people kind of explain things to me to kind of get it without looking up like guides online, because that's not at that point. I feel like what's the point if you're just reading?
So my issue with JRPGs now is random encounters are terrible. Just in general, like the expectation of you're walking from one place to another in a dungeon, and you don't know how many times you're gonna have to fight. You don't know when you're going to fight, and you have just no tell. And part of the game mechanics are you should just be fighting and grinding levels, because you don't really get an indicator when you're powerful enough to advance on. So you just easily get into a place where you're convincing yourself to grind an area, and that's not fun. Not fun at all to just walk around a dungeon and kill things.
It gets repetitive for sure.
Absolutely. And the combat's not deep enough in those games to really justify being in it all that often.
Okay.
I think that's what I like a lot about the times I've dabbled into Final Fantasy 6 randomizers and Final Fantasy 4 randomizers for Enterprise and Worlds Collide, is that you just don't have the random combat, because there's nothing deep about fighting cave bats.
Right. So in those randomizers, you're not grinding as much, basically.
No, they tend to tweak the experience and the ability points or tech points, whatever it is in the game. So that you're getting a ton of it. You're getting enough out of boss fights. That's really all you need to do.
Okay. But as a kid, you were enthralled.
Oh, as a kid, the Final Fantasy VI's story is incredible. And as a kid, trying to do everything in it and get all the side quests done, and it was super fun to me. And the grinding thing wasn't nearly as bad for me, because what else am I going to do? Homework?
Right. Of course. Yeah. Yeah. No, you're just going to play the games that we've got. Right. Like a lot of this you're talking about is in retrospect, right? Having played better versions of JRPGs or games that have improved on what those lacked, for sure. It's hard to find games that have held up as well over time. I think there's a few on the Super Nintendo. Like, I think Link to the Past holds up extremely well. I think Super Mario World holds up extremely well.
I think both those games hold up really well. I think Donkey Kong Country, the graphics look pretty bad now, but the gameplay is still pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, the graphics are definitely have aged, but I still think they're uniquely cool.
Yeah,
in a way.
And I think like developers were willing to take chances in that era of gaming that they aren't now. Like, there are some charming weird games on the Super Nintendo. Uniracers.
Sure. Oh yeah. Yep.
There's a port of an arcade game called in Japan it's called Camel Tree, where you are controlling the level and moving a marble through the level. The marble's constantly falling down, and you're controlling how the level moves the marble through it.
Yeah, the Super Nintendo and the original Nintendo as well had just a litany of games, and so it really felt like people were just throwing everything that they could to see what would stick.
And you see it more now when like indie games are like especially in like DSware in that era of gaming where people are willing to take chances on weird concepts again. Where you just didn't see that on PlayStation after like PS2, PS3, and really not at all on Xbox.
I wonder if it's just the cost of.
I think it is
making the games. Yeah, it probably just went up. So you're playing the NES, you're playing Super Nintendo, you're playing Game Boy. Do you venture into other consoles before the PlayStation? Are you into the Genesis at all?
No, it was Nintendo only here. My neighbor had a Genesis. I played it over there. Sonic wasn't a game that really enthralled me. The console that I wish I at that time I would have picked up was a TurboGrafx. I really liked the shooters that they had on that console. I don't remember if Treasure was making shooters on that console before Sega Saturn, but they had some very good shoot 'em up games. Actually enjoyed the Bonk games too when I played them.
That's one of those games that I remember seeing in like gaming magazines and video game magazines and comic magazines, and being like, I need to play this, and then just never knowing anyone with a TurboGrafx 16 to play it. And by the time I got older, I kind of forgot about it and never went back and played it. But
and it was only out for a couple of years too.
But that was one of those games as a kid, you look at it and you're like, oh, this seems cool. This is like independent and different, and no one else has this, so I want it. But I couldn't tell you if it's any good or not.
Yeah, I haven't touched Bonk since the early 2000s and like the early days of emulation. So I couldn't tell you if it's any good anymore.
Sure. What about like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat? Were you playing any of that stuff?
In the arcades, I didn't like those games enough to buy the home versions. I've never been much of a fighting game person.
You mentioned arcades, and this is something that I haven't really talked about with anyone on the show. And you're the perfect age because we're the same age. I don't remember not being in an arcade as a kid. Like, I spent so much time in arcade, and I was really into like racing games and football. Like Blitz was a really big one for me.
Blitz, yeah. I spent most of I had consoles at home, so I didn't spend a ton of time in arcades. But when we were on trips and stuff, like, I would spend a fair amount of time in the arcades playing like old racing games. Ivan Hoffman's Off-Road.
Yeah, like super like
Sprint.
Rad Racer. Do you remember that one?
I do remember Rad Racer.
Spy Hunter, those kind of games.
Yeah.
I remember playing I remember playing a lot of these stupid games, but spending tons of quarters. And then I was probably, gosh, I'm trying to think about how old I was when GameWorks opened in Seattle.
Yeah.
And I remember taking trips up to Seattle because I was in Tacoma and just spending like a whole day there and everyone racing. Like they have those sets of cars, like it's like, I don't know, 12 or
like
something.
a wall of 8 or 12 and like Daytona.
Yeah.
Daytona USA.
Yeah, Daytona was huge. Daytona was a big one. But yeah, I just remember spending so much time in those arcades. And it feels like, I mean, obviously because of home consoles, but in the 80s and the 90s, arcades were the place to be.
Yeah.
If you liked video games and you didn't have like, I loved, the other ones that I loved were like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, X-Men, Avengers, Simpsons games.
Yeah.
Which are the beat 'em ups. Yeah. Which are just so dumb because they literally just like, you're just pumping coins in just to keep going. And it's the same thing over and over again, but you're playing with your friends. It was so cool.
Classic quarter munchers. Yeah. Oh, I put so much money into Turtles and I put
Turtles and X-Men were the big ones for me.
Turtles and Simpsons. I also really enjoyed the Neo Geo cabinets. They had like beyond the fighting games, they also had like that also always have like Bust a Move on them.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 Count Bout, which is like a wrestling fighting game.
I'm not familiar with that one. But yeah, I remember spending a lot of time, a lot of money, and I don't know, it was just fun. Like, did you ever play the 6-person X-Men game where you got to play with 6 players? It's like,
I don't think I ever got to play that with a full cabinet. But I do know what you're talking about. Like, it's so big that they have to do tricks with the monitors in there.
Yeah.
And use mirrors in it to actually display it on the screen.
Yep.
So
yeah. Oh man, it was so cool. We'd spend so much time in the bowling alley, not bowling, but playing video games.
Yeah. Bowling. Who's doing that?
Right. We wanted to play the video games. All right. So you move on from Nintendo and you start heading into the PlayStation era. Is it because of like Final Fantasy VII or was it just the new system?
It was because Final Fantasy VII was coming out on the PlayStation, and I wasn't looking at the Nintendo 64. Really, I wasn't like I had Mario 3 with Super Mario World, but I didn't like. I enjoyed those games, but I didn't enjoy them enough to move to 3D.
I see.
The N64 is like the one Nintendo console I never owned.
Okay.
Didn't have one until my fiance brought one in. Like I jumped over to PlayStation because it had Final Fantasy, it had Metal Gear Solid, and kind of stayed in that space for a generation or two.
Okay. So tell me about your time with the PlayStation 2. Was Final Fantasy like it for you? Final
Mostly like, of the games I still have, it's Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 9, Tactics, couple other older RPGs from other companies like Legend of Legaia. My library on the PlayStation 1 was pretty small. It was just all of those very large games, those in Metal Gear Solid.
Right. That takes a lot of your time.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah.
Yeah. You're getting a lot more bang for your buck in terms of the size of the game. But the 3D games I never really got into a ton. My taste in games kind of stayed in the 2D,
the retro stuff.
Yeah. Early mid 90s stuff.
Did the Final Fantasy games fix some of the complaints that you had about the retrospect look back, or are they still part of the problem?
So the weird thing is Final Fantasy X, I did not like that much as a kid, or when it came out. I guess I was like 20 at that point, not a kid at that point.
Is that like the PlayStation 2?
Yeah, that's the first one on the PlayStation 2.
Okay.
I went back and played it a few years ago, and I liked it a lot more because it's willing to accept that one of the big problems with JRPGs, if you're playing them broken up, is if you play it, you set it aside for a week, you come back, what's going on?
Yep.
What was I doing? Yep. Where do I need to go? You don't really get signposts in the game very often as to what you're supposed to be doing. So you're kind of running around a little bit confused. And as systems got better and games got newer, the worlds got bigger, and there's a lot more space where you're just like, I don't know what I'm doing. Do I have to start over now? How much time do I want to spend trying to catch up? And Final Fantasy X is a game that's very on rails for 85% of it, which I didn't like as a kid or when it came out, but works way better for me now.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, right? Because as a kid, your time is different.
Also, I think the combat in 10 is a lot deeper than it looks on the surface for a game in that turn-based style.
Okay. Yeah, I get it. So have you continued on with the Final Fantasy series? I'm not sure where we're at. Even like, I know the 7 remake came out recently, and I know they're working on other stuff, but
yeah, I played and liked 12. And then that was it for a while. Eventually I got 15 when it came out and gave it like 5 hours and then set it aside forever. Square's just got some problematic things going on with a lot of their character depictions. Okay. They don't know how to rate certain types of characters well.
Okay. I never played it and have no idea what you're talking about, so I'm just going to trust you on what you're saying.
Yeah, you'll figure it out if you ever play that game. You'll know a couple hours in what I'm talking about. It's very obvious, and I don't know. It's a creative decision that I don't agree with, but.
So did it make you stop playing the Final Fantasy series, or?
No. Time kind of made me stop playing the Final Fantasy series. I went from working part-time jobs to having a full-time job and taking care of a house, and eventually having partners and just not having the time to dedicate 100 hours into a game. That's one of the reasons, like, Randomizer is one of the few things I play is I'll be done in 2 hours.
Right. Yeah. I 100% get that. Like, I'm a parent of 3, work full time, and trying to devote time to a game is super hard.
Yeah.
When you're single and alone, that sounds terrible. Being alone isn't bad, but one of the benefits is you get to
a lot of time to play a lot of video games or play a lot of Magic or find other ways to cope with with being alone.
Yeah. And you just mentioned Magic, so let's talk a little bit about that. So, Magic is a global brand. It is made in Renton, though. So I remember Wizards of the Coast stores popping up around here in the late 90s, I'm going to say, early 2000s.
Yep.
So what got you into Magic? Because I know you've played a bit, and I'm not sure if you actually played on the Pro Tour as well, right?
Yeah, I've played in a couple of Pro Tours, not nearly as successful as some of your other guests on this program.
I mean, that's pretty crazy that 2 Magic pros on the show. But
calling you a pro is a bit of a stretch. But
you played on the Pro Tour, so I'm going to call you a pro.
That's fair. I started playing Magic very early. I was in chess team in high school in 1993, 94. And I saw people playing Magic in between rounds of chess games at tournaments.
And this is like the original set.
Yeah.
Alpha, beta sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I think at that point, maybe Antiquities had come out, or Arabian Nights. Not much had been actually come out for the set other than the original cards. And seeing someone with a Shivan Dragon in a hard plastic case, it's impactful, and the game is fun. And I didn't really have the wherewithal to pick up my own cards or anything for a few years. I didn't start actually like playing and collecting until 1998. But Magic was a part of my life for a long time.
So what was it that after that initial, like, oh, this is cool, it wasn't until you said like late 90s where you actually started collecting? Was it the friends? Was it the game? Was it the competition? What was it that drew you in?
It was the games. It was the competition. It was the environment. You mentioned the WotC stores that were popping up in malls. Before that, they had an arcade in Seattle, right in the University District, by the University of Washington. And so I would go there and draft. And that's the same place that 2 of the world championships were played, in that building. And also there's a giant arcade upstairs and a PC room and a console room right next door. It was a really incredible place to go play and just
nerd out
and make friends. So I played. I wasn't good, but it didn't matter.
I mean, you gotta learn, right? You gotta start somewhere. Do you remember what set this was that you started? Like
Urza Saga.
Oh, okay. Nice. So this is a long time ago.
This is a long time ago, yeah. And quite a very simple set, not complicated at all for someone to get plugged into. Very low power.
That's funny.
But the game hooked me, and after that store closed down, I would play it. They had a store at South Center Mall in Tukwila and local card shops, and I would draft, and then eventually started. I traveled for a couple tournaments, thinking I was better than I actually was, and then really kind of took a break on that for a few years, and then literally came back for one tournament and qualified for the Pro Tour.
Which Pro Tour was that?
And that was Valencia in 2007.
Which set?
That one was extended. That was just after Lorwyn came out, but Lorwyn was not legal for it yet.
Okay, that was Lorwyn was when they first introduced Planeswalkers too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so how did you qualify? Was it like a PTQ that you qualified?
Yeah, it was a PTQ. It was time spiral block constructed. Okay. So standard but smaller.
Magic's so different back then.
It really is. It really is.
I miss block constructed. I thought those were really fun.
Yeah, I miss the block structure. I don't know if we want to like turn this into Magic Talk 2023.
I mean, we can do whatever we want.
Boomer Magic Talk.
Yeah,
totally. I miss that. I miss that the developers of the game don't have as much time to slowly introduce new ideas than they do now.
Sure. I think story-wise, it worked better when things were in a block. When I remember when the Avengers fied Magic with like a Battle for Zendikar and brought in the Gatewatch, and then I think that was like around the time that they started doing, I think it was like 2 blocks sets or something. I can't remember. I know they had a problem where it was like they had the fall block, and then you had the 2 blocks after it that were small sets.
Yeah.
And it felt when you got to the 3rd set that most of all the good stuff was done. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And so there was definitely a problem with the 3rd sets. But when they just cut the 3rd set and only did 2, it felt like there was missing something there. And so then I don't know the answers. I don't know how you fix all that. But what they've done, I don't think is the answer either. So I don't know.
No, I'm not a fan of the Avengerification or the Marvel Universification of Magic story and the pacing of sets.
Yeah.
Both gameplay wise, I think ideas are either just they just are done so quickly that either they don't balance them well and they're overpowered. Things like energy, things like
just some giant set sometimes. Like
so, yeah. Like the entirety of Throne of Eldraine, things like that. But they're also, unfortunately, they're not good enough storytellers to kind of pay these arcs off.
Yeah, which is a hard thing to do, right? Because you're doing it's a card game. You're developing a card game, and so what's made Magic special and last over the years is the fact that there is flavor to it all.
Yeah,
and it's hard to incorporate the flavor into the set and make it. You're trying to juggle a lot of different balls, right? And trying to do it all is definitely difficult. And it feels like there's times where they've got it right and sometimes that they've gotten wrong. And it just feels like, for me, as someone who hasn't played in a while now, I just I'm out. I'm out of it. But for me, when I got back in right before, because I played as a kid in high school, I remember playing at lunchtime, not really knowing what we were doing. But I got back in around New Phyrexia, Scars of Mirrodin, New Phyrexia. And then Innistrad came out after that. And it's legit one of the best Magic sets of all time. And it was like the perfect time to join because it hit everything, like flavor, mechanics, gameplay, everything about Innistrad. That first Innistrad set was so good. And I actually really enjoyed like the Innistrad Return to Ravnica constructed. It was like perfect time for me to like get into it. Everyone was having a lot of fun, and
I think
that stuff.
That is definitely one of the high points of Magic is that Innistrad Return to Ravnica. Theros is a little bit of a step down, but it's still fine.
I remember like the block constructed Pro Tours because the third set you'd get block constructed for the Pro Tour,
right?
And I just remember how much fun those were because you're taking the best of the three sets and doing what you can. But that's a long time ago now. Like that, that's not recent. That was quite a bit.
Can't do that anymore. That's for sure.
So did you plan on trying to grind out the Pro Tour or try to make it a living when people were trying to do it, or was it just like I qualified and we'll just kind of see where it goes from there?
I was young, I was foolish. I thought I was better at the game than I was. I thought I was going to do well at the Pro Tour. Didn't do enough preparation. Didn't find people in the area to work with, and did poorly. And got sent back out the door where I belonged. I think that strangely enough, like you talked about this with Ari as well, like the community here in Seattle is just not as good as the community in a lot of other areas in terms of people wanting to work together to do well at professional level events.
It feels there's way more like lone wolf, like I'm going to do it on my own sort of feeling here than it is on like the East Coast or even California
or Wisconsin.
Where it's like let's do it. If you do well, I do well, sort of thing. You know what I mean?
It was that, and the best players that were out here at the time enjoyed limited a lot more than constructed, and this is back when tournaments were one single format.
I see.
So the Pro Tour I was at, that Pro Tour that I was at was all extended. Trying to find
didn't draft at all. Okay.
No, didn't draft at all. So trying to find people that want to play extended when there aren't any tournaments in the Seattle area that qualify for anything that use extended, and people just want to draft. It was impossible. And I wasn't, and I'm still not particularly good at networking, social networking in terms of making connections in environments. I think that extends to the link to the LTTBR rando community as well. I'm not in super deep in a lot of people's discords or popping into a bunch of community races or things like that. A lot of them don't fit my schedule, and I'm kind of like a vampire. You got to invite me in. You have to be explicit.
Is that what you think it is? It's just you're not as social when it comes to making your way in the community? Yeah.
I feel like I feel like part of my brain wants people to explicitly want me there.
I 100% agree. not with you, but this is a struggle that I have on my own, where it's like I feel like I've had to force my way in a little bit more, and it's because if I don't, I feel like I'm ostracized a little bit more, like I'm on the outside looking in.
Yeah,
and that's I know that's also an internal struggle because I've got a podcast where I talk to people, so I shouldn't be feeling that way,
right?
but I still do.
It's such a hard feeling to shake and get rid of. Like, I know, like, the rational, normal brain knows that people are happy to have me in their community. I haven't burned too many bridges, if any. I'm not a super toxic person, but I am at times. I am someone who is more pessimistic than others. At times, I am someone who is critical, especially of their own gameplay. And I know that, like, the non-rational part of my brain thinks, oh, people don't want that around. people don't want the whole package of me around because those things can show up.
It's so crazy what our brain does, right? Because it's not true. It's like we're putting expectations on something that hasn't even happened yet, right? Like you're not even letting people have an opportunity to reject you, right? Yeah, no. It's like I'm going to reject it before they can reject me.
That's how it was, and that's how it was for me back then, trying to test for Pro Tour and thinking I could do it all on my own, and I definitely could not.
Yeah, I get it, man. I'm there with you. It's a struggle, and it bleeds into so many different things, whether it's rando or other areas of our lives for sure. Just know that you have other people that feel the same way, and it's hard to just say like get over it and like put yourself out there, but that's kind of what you got to do is kind of force yourself into situations that make you uncomfortable, and hopefully they work out. And if they don't, realize that it's not like doesn't necessarily reflect on you as a person,
right?
Which is hard. Again, I'm saying this as someone who has to tell himself constantly. These sort of things.
Unless you have the kind of personality where you believe that everyone loves you no matter what, you've constantly got to just tell yourself that you're you. People will accept you for who you are. If they don't, it's probably them. If there's a lot of people that don't, then maybe you should look at yourself. But
sure, if there's a pattern, but then most of the time you're not even allowing the opportunity. Like I was watching, so this, I'm not sure if you're into football. I don't think you are, but Deion Sanders is coaching the Colorado Buffalo right now.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever watch Deion Sanders, I mean, he goes by Prime because of how much ego and self-confidence he has.
Time back in the day,
yeah. And I can't remember who I was talking to, my counselor or somebody, but I was like, I wish I had like an ounce, 1% of the self-confidence that he has in me. Like he believes in himself way more than he probably even should. I mean, he's talented and successful and all that stuff. And he's, there's reason to believe in yourself, but he believes in himself so much. And I wish I had just a sliver of that self-confidence.
Oh yeah.
Would make things a little bit easier for me, but it is what it is. That's why we kind of, I think, are drawn to video games and Magic the Gathering and stuff. There's something that, I don't know, the fantasy element captures it, right?
It is, well, it's that, and it's also a lot easier to build community when you have multiple common interests. And if you're going to a Magic tournament or you're playing Link to the Past Randomizer and tournaments or on the ladder with people, and you're playing the same people over and over again, you know that they enjoy the same things that you do, or at least in this context, and they have the same general level of competitiveness in their approach to how they're dealing with this hobby.
Yep. Yeah. 100%. So as you're playing Magic, and this is when you're a little bit older, are you still playing video games? I imagine the answer is yes.
Yes, but less so.
Okay.
After the tournament, I got a bit more into the grind of going to tournaments. I traveled to a lot of Grand Prix in North America between 2007 and 2013. Made another pro tour, got to go to Europe again, and finally ended up getting burned out, and kind of the combination of that and picking more responsibilities at work and not having the time to really draft a bunch online and go to Friday Night Magics and play a lot, put a lot of reps in, kind of push myself from being someone who was playing every weekend and traveling to 5 or 6 events across the country to someone who would play in the PTQs when they happened, play in Grand Prix when they were close in a format I wanted to play in, and that's about it.
I see. So you start watching GDQs, I take it because you're familiar with speedrunning?
Yeah. I have been streaming on Twitch back in 2011, 2012, just as sharing PTQs, sharing Magic drafts, things like that.
Sure. Was it Twitch then, or was it still just on TV?
It was just becoming Twitch.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Because I always wonder what draws people to Twitch, or how do they find out about it, especially with people our age.
Yeah.
I found out pretty late. But if you're playing Magic, then that's definitely a way in for sure.
Yeah, and I caught a GDQ at some point. I don't remember exactly what year, but people playing classic video games that I enjoyed really fast and doing things to those games that shouldn't be done by normal human people. It caught my attention. It was a really fun event to watch and see. It didn't make me want to get into speedrunning personally, but watching them was a lot of fun.
Sure. So this leads to a link to the Past Randomizer, which we talked about. You start racing, you're in the secondary tournament. What's it like for you early on in those early rando days? Are you finding people to play with outside of your friends that were playing with you?
I ended up doing like most of the weeklies. The speed gaming at that point had 2 different weeklies.
Yeah.
They had what is now Casual Boots weekly on Saturday, and then the Open on Sunday. And both
those
races,
big races, really big races.
Both races would pop 50 people minimum, and climb up from that. I think the biggest one was after the Sunday after Andy Christos at AGDQ 2018. I think that one had like 153 people in it or something, some absurd number.
Wow, that's crazy.
Picked up all of those. So I was playing those every weekend, at least one of them, and generally finishing bottom half, but having a good time. I
think it's hard because we put so much emphasis on results because it is a race, right?
Yeah.
That sometimes it takes away, or it can take away, the fun of it, right? Like I think that's been my struggle or one of the struggles that I've had with the game is like, I only enjoy it when I'm racing, but I don't love the racing aspect at the same time. You know what I mean?
I totally get it.
Yeah.
For me, I have kind of taken the perspective of I have X amount of hours where I'm not working or not doing house stuff or not being a good partner, where I get to play the game. And I can dedicate a ton of that time to making myself better, putting a bunch of practice in and not racing other people and working on various boss fights, working on various technology, things of that nature. The grind is not fun for me.
Yeah,
it's not. I would rather just be racing people. And if I win, I win. I don't, whatever. So I don't actually use a lot of the tech that has been found over the last 5 years. I don't know spooky action. I don't mimic clip. I don't do a lot of the parlor trick kind of stuff that is a little more complicated. And I mean, I could probably learn spooky action if I took an afternoon to do it, but I'd rather just be racing.
Sure. So it's fair to say that you've never ran an NMG race?
I have never ran an NMG race. I did 100% speed runs as a joke for a while.
Okay. All right.
Because there's a sick, perverse part of my brain that enjoys how hilarious it is that there are 2 just giant RNG points in the middle of that run.
Right. The chess game and the dig spot.
The dig spot, which is more skill than people let on, but the chess game is just pure RNG.
Sure. Yeah. So you're racing the game. You're not taking time to like learn strats and stuff. Or is this early on, or you are learning some basic stuff?
Early on, I'm really, what I'm doing is I'm watching other people and trying to do what they do as best I can. It's hard to watch a lot of people running this game and not pick things up.
Sure.
Like how to do rooms somewhat efficiently. I'm never going to be like NMG perfect going through like Mire 2 or whatever. But you pick up the Armos quick kill, you pick up things like the Stalfos Night Room and Ice Palace, how to do that in one bomb. You pick up things here and there. And you just generally pick up how to move through the world in a mostly efficient way. And I get enough. And the thing that I enjoy most of Randomizer is kind of how to solve the puzzle.
Yeah.
And how to either exploit something that you find early that you don't think your opponent's going to find, or protect yourself if you think that you're better than your opponent and just don't want to lose to them doing that, to finding something early and exploiting it and pushing that advantage. The routing game and the meta game are what's most interesting to me about Randomizer.
I see. So what has your tournament life been like? Have you played a lot of tournaments? Or have you entered a lot of tournaments over the years?
I've entered a lot of tournaments and I've done not so great in all of them.
Yeah.
I did the big 512 Swiss. I missed brackets or groups. I forget if it went to a group stage after that or it went straight to a top 128 or whatever bracket. I missed the cutoff by one match, which I actually had to skip a week on that. I was on a cruise and just couldn't find time to play that week. Sure. But that race was going to be against M. Kozler, and I was not going to win that anyways. So for names from the community that no one remembers.
Sure. I mean, back in the 512 days, there was a lot of racers that are no longer playing the game. But
yeah. And then I did a couple of the spoiler log tournaments. There is a hilarious video on YouTube of me versus Gerdo from, I think this was 2020, maybe 2019, of Gerdo's strategy in that tournament and that spoiler log tournament is that they thought that they believed they could out execute anyone, which is probably true. And so spoiler tournaments are different than regular randomizer. You get to watch your opponent.
Yeah.
And you get to watch any restreams that are going on. So there's this very funny clip from that video of me going to Swamp Palace, mirroring over, entering Swamp Palace, and then realizing I don't have flippers. And then Gerdo 10 seconds later doing the exact same thing. And then me going back out, walking over to Dig Spot to go get the flippers. And then Gerdo immediately going over and doing the exact same thing.
So he was just watching you?
Yeah. He was literally just watching me and drafting off of me up to a point where either I don't know if he had actually built out a route in those races or a list of where items were, but he was just drafting off of me until a point where he could get into go mode and pass me on execution.
Wow.
And it felt awful at the time, but it made sense. Like,
yeah. I mean, it feels like rubbing it in your face a little bit, right?
It does. But at the same time, like I knew he was doing it after that moment. I could have changed my strategy. I could have started grabbing more safeties. I could have literally drafted him into doing doing things that only benefited me by making the game easier. Right.
Yeah.
Like, sure. I didn't change my strategy to adjust. And the execution difference between me and them is a gulf wide. So, or it was at that point.
Sure. I mean, so expectations, because I know you get disappointed when you lose, but you also don't take the time or have the time to spend grinding, right? Like,
right.
So is it a matter of expectations in yourself are too high, or is it like the Magic thing where you kind of went into the Pro Tour where it's like, I'm good, and then realize other people put maybe more time in than you have?
The only time that I have been disappointed in how I did, and disappointed to the point where I was upset with myself and my performance, and felt like I didn't do something I thought I should be able to do, was League last year.
Okay. What happened?
We went through the regular season. Me, Tepe, PH, Pastapkanya.
Good team, man. It's a good team.
It's they do a very good job of carrying me. That's for sure.
I don't know if you listened to the Dr. Bob episode, but we definitely got to talk about self awareness, or like self-talk. It feels like again,
specifically though, in the regular season, I was a part of every loss we had.
Sure.
We went 10-4. I lost 3 individual races and 1 team race with PH.
Did you win any races?
I did.
Okay. So it's not that your team went 11-3 in the regular season, right?
Yeah, 11-3, and I went 5-3 in the races I was involved in.
Okay.
Like, I'm not terrible, but I am not at the level that those two men are.
Sure.
Like,
but again, PH puts a lot of time, runs NMG.
Yeah.
And Tepedino's been playing for a long time, also puts in a lot of different times. So
he puts in a lot of effort in NMG as well, or did. I know he's coming back from a break. Right. But I was responsible for all the losses for the team. And
well, so was PH. PH was lost that first week too. It's a team game.
Yeah. But we get in the playoffs and PH wins his individual race. I forget which. It was the pick a mode one. Tepe wins his Kaz Boots race. I get beat in cross keys. I enjoy racing cross keys. I'm not particularly good at it. I think my ladder record is 30% win rate. It's pretty bad. But Tepe felt more comfortable being in the Kaz Boot slot for playoffs, and I was fine running cross keys. And we joke in our team chat after that if I'm the only person losing, we're gonna win the Open. No problem. Because that's only 2 losses in 5 games. So PH loses game 4, and we get into game 5. It's the reference with me and Tepe versus VGF Taylor, and I forget if it was Dixon or
it was Dixon. I'm looking at
Dixon.
It. Yeah.
And Tepe finishes first and steps away for a minute, and I'm climbing. And I had in that race, I'd had a bad death on Cold Stare, I believe. So that cost me like a minute and a half, 2 minutes. Tepe had some other routing mistake or a smaller mistake that cost some amount of time. But Tepe steps away, and it's just me running. And one of the 2 of Asai's team finishes. And as I'm starting into the Ganon fight, I don't have silvers, and in the middle of phase 1 or 2, the other runner finishes, and I'm looking at the timer, so I have it up, and I realize we're gonna lose. There's no way for me to make up the time difference, given where we're at, and I might have even like fallen in one of the first or died in the first phase or 2 of that Ganon fight too. I don't remember, but there was some very large mistake that I made that cost more than enough time to make up that difference. And I was crushed. I couldn't even bring myself to get on interviews at the end of that race.
Sure.
That's really the only time where I've been like, that is a position where I think that our team and my skill level, we probably, it was a very close race. Then Rainbow happens, but there are various obvious points in that race where I think that my execution failures cost us. And I took that loss really hard.
Sure. I get it. And I'm not going to try to tell you to feel better about it, but everyone has those issues, right? Like even the best runners have lost because of their execution not being up to the snuff of whatever they think it should be. Like there's probably things that you did in that race where you feel like, oh, I could have done this way better, and I should have done this way better, and I have done this way better.
Yeah.
And it just sort of happens, right? Like it's tough, but that stuff happens.
Yeah. But other tournaments, I've made the main tournament a few times. I've missed it a few times. 2021 Challenge Cup. I should have beat Late Bit, who ended up winning the whole thing. Our race in the first round of brackets went to a 4th game. The tie rules back then were still some number of seconds instead of just a full review. I won game 1, and then game 2 I beat Ganon a second faster than he did. Game 3 was close in his favor, and then game 4 I left a mirror in Mireshed forever.
Wow. It's rough, man. This game is rough.
It is.
The game can be super unforgiving. So was Past Bacania wasn't your first go in the league, right?
No, it wasn't. In season 4, I was a late pickup for Duke, Firebird, and Roach's team, the Immortals.
Okay.
They had someone agree to be their teammate. Yeah, Julo agreed to be their teammate and then leave for another team very shortly before the start of league. And at that point, I was a bit in the mindset of thinking I was better than I actually was, because I'd posted a free agent message in there, because I'd not played in season 2 or 3 of the league because of mental things. I feel worse when I let other people down.
Sure. I get it.
And especially when you're playing with people you don't know. Like if you're playing with friends, you're having fun. But I didn't have a large community of friends in here that are in Randomizer that I felt comfortable asking to team with, and some of my friends that I had done rando with when we first started back in 2017, I tried to convince them to join the league, and it never really worked out. So I had posted as a free agent, and there were a couple people at the open league level that had asked if I wanted to join them, and I thought I was better than I was. And when I was going to decide to agree or not to agree to join them, because I didn't know who they were, Duke and Roach approached me and asked me if I wanted to join their team. So I kind of blew off the 2 other players and joined Duke and Roach. And not one of my prouder moments of acting as a person in this community.
Are you saying that you told them you were going to do it and then backed out?
Yes.
Okay, I see.
Yes.
Okay. And I mean, let's just be frank. You were in the Invitational season 4. Did not go well. So you guys ended up getting relegated that season. Was it a bad experience for your first season of the league, or I mean, mentally, how did you handle everything?
Duke and Roach can tell their own parts of this. There were a lot of outside factors that were causing all of us to have issues dedicating time and energy and interest into that season. For me, I was having some health issues. I raced wall kicks, I think it was week 2 of that season, and ended up in the ER later that night.
Oh man.
And I had started to feel sick during the afternoon, but still decided to take the race anyways, because it didn't feel like it was going to be impacting me that much. But during the race, I was shivering and just in a terrible state. And Duke and Roach were not super thrilled with me, like sticking with the race and not trying to get rescheduled. I didn't really feel like I had a ton of choice there. It was fairly late in the week, if I remember, to get it rescheduled, or for them, if they find a replacement, then I'm kind of out of the team, which I don't know.
So let's just say it wasn't the best.
No, it wasn't the best experience. And we never really cohesed or really fell together as teammates or more than acquaintances.
Sure. That's tough, especially when you're like you mentioned, a vampire, where you need people to invite you in, then it doesn't go well. And then it sort of feeds that idea of like, maybe I'm right to be a vampire, right?
Exactly.
But it feels like with Past Randomizer last season, things made a change. So
yeah. Peach and Tepe are just super friendly people, and Tepe has a background in Magic as well as a judge, so we have that connection as well. And
okay,
I mean, we work a lot better than I did with the Immortals.
Sure. You finally clicked. You found a couple of guys that you could play with and enjoy, and you guys did really well. And again, I really want to put words in your mouth, but season 4 or season 5 last year was a better experience, I would say.
Oh yeah.
Like, regardless of the wins and losses, right? Like, it feels like playing with people that you enjoy playing with is way
better than people that you don't know, and
exactly.
already have this mental thing that you don't want to let other people down. Like, if I lose. It's whatever. It's like, I know that I am not putting 110% into my development as a player in this game, and that's fine by me.
Yeah.
But when you lose and you let other people down, and you make a commitment to a team, and to especially at invitational level where everyone is trying to stay up there and trying to succeed, there aren't no one that's playing in the invitational is there just to have fun, right? Like, fun is the goal.
Sure.
But you want to win too. Like,
Yeah.
You want to win. You want to be successful.
Sure.
However you define success in the context of a season.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Good.
So, we've talked a lot about the mental side of things. Let's talk tilt. How do you handle tilt? Whether it's in a race or at the end of the race, or you talked about a little bit about the end of the last league season or whatever. But how do you handle it
in a race? I can tell when I'm tilted when I start losing interest in the outcomes of things. Like you make a check and it's bad, or you die on a boss, and then I start to check out a little bit on and then stop making necessarily the best routing decision or gameplay decisions. And I can tell when I'm doing that, and you just got to figure out what to do to kind of refocus in a race. There's not enough time to really let it take over if the race means anything.
Is there something that you do to refocus? Is it breathing? Is it talking to yourself? Is there
one of the things that I found, and this really worked out in the qualifiers for the 2022 main tournament, because I did have a couple situations where I had bad deaths. Just do something else. Don't just hop back in and try and do it again. There's got to be something else that can advance the game, let you focus on doing something else, and you come back to it later. Come back to the situation later. You'll be better equipped, hopefully. But just find something else. Find some other way to have a success in the context of the race itself. Sure. So that helps me. It doesn't. There are times where you just can't find one. I had a race in groups of that tournament that was in Flukeys. Worst possible scenario for me. Moon Pearl on Mothula, and
that's a tough fight. It's a tough fight.
I avoided it because I know that I'm not very good at Fighter Sword Green Mail Mothula, and ended up doing literally everything else that I could. And out of the seed, I was able to ring out of the seed before every check I could do logically and not. I think I was able to ring out like 6 hearts blue mail. Is literally all you could get. Before you had to take on that fight. And my opponent just handled that fight fine and beat me. It was closer than it should have been, I think. Or I already made up time on the back end, but just sometimes you just can't do it, and you just gotta to suck it up and realize that not every race is winnable.
Yeah. Yep.
As for long-term tilt, if I'm on a big losing streak, I'll just shut it down and take a break and do some other things for a week or two or a month or two. You get to a point where there's just you're not playing well, and you're not thinking well about the game because you've been losing so much that you just got to step away.
Sure. Yep.
I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here.
A bit. Yeah, a bit. But I get it for sure. Well, dude, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. I super appreciate it. And I know we didn't talk a ton of rando, but
and you have I was joking in my mind. You've had high class, high quality tournament winning runners on this season. You've had high quality tournament calling commentators and developers and Magic players, and I'm like the 7 of all trades, not even a jack.
I don't know, man. We did talk about commentary, but I know we've done a couple of commentary races together, and I've enjoyed the times that we've done commentary together. I think you're really good on the mic. So
yeah, I really enjoy commentary. I think the times when I do take breaks from playing, I will still do commentary, and that helps me kind of recenter myself too. Is just watching other people play and getting to enjoy just watching the game for a little bit. And we didn't talk at all about the website I built either.
Let's do that. You know what? We got time before we get to the end. Let's talk about, I totally forgot about the website you built, which is freaking amazing.
Thank you.
Tell us how this came about and kind of what it was.
So it came about from League last season, actually. Tep NPH and I were blowing through all of the asyncs off of Tabby's spreadsheets.
Okay.
And we're trying to find other races to async against. Mm-hmm. And trying to find specific races in race time is terrible. It's not good.
Sure.
So I've done some other API stuff with the ladder to kind of build out a little web page for myself to have all of my standings and rankings and what settings each race mode was in kind of built into a little web page I could put on my stream so that it's just visually there and people can look at it when they come in and don't have to ask.
Mm-hmm. This is projects.thecleanupstep.com, right?
Yeah, that's the terrible URL that my site has. I've not thought of. I'm going to get a new domain for it. I just haven't thought of the name yet. Sure. Something that's much more germane to what it actually is than a reference to Magic and a project site somewhere off on the side.
Yeah.
So no, we were having problems just finding races to do, and I started looking at the API information that you can get off race time for races and trying to figure out a way if I could sort this out in some way that was usable and readable and searchable.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully, like all that data is, at least when it gets generated from FnX bot, all that data is pretty standardized. You get what preset was used, you get the hash, you get the seed URL, you get all that kind of in the same place every time. So I wrote a site up that would look for that information, pull it into a database, make it searchable. And then the next step was setting up a separate part of the database so that people could put their times in and not get spoiled by the room or not get spoiled by the times, and see how they'd finish against other people. Because that's what we were looking for, was some way to grab this race information and not have to hop in, grab the link for the seed, going to the race room, and then seeing how people did, seeing that, oh, one of us actually ran this race. So that's where it all came out of. And it's just been something I've been slowly building for the last year.
It's really cool. Like using it for the league, especially was really the first time that I used it. It's just super convenient and really easy to read and find out the information and plug it all in and then see the other times. It's really cool. People definitely should check it out if they're looking to do some asyncs and stuff.
Yeah. Thank you for the endorsement. It's something that after I built it just for TA, for Tepe and PH and myself, I'm like, this is something that if I make it a little more full functional, it would be something that's useful for community. So I put the work in, I did that. And now I've got it grabbing spoiler logs immediately or automatically off of spoiler races. Co-ops are now being detected. So you can put in your co-op information for team as one group thing, and it will grab all the times from all the teams in the race and automatically sort them.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. It's been a lot of fun to work on, honestly.
Yeah. It's always cool to see the new tools that people come up with just to, help the community out in different ways, or, even help yourself out in one way. All right, James, thanks so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on, and hope everyone enjoyed the therapy session disguised as a randomizer podcast.
Thanks again for James coming on the show. Really appreciate him being here and for being open and honest and sharing exactly how he feels. And I always appreciate that. Good to have another Washingtonian on the show, and just a real good dude. I really like talking with him, and it seems like he'd be a really good hang too. So maybe next time I'm in the area, we can grab a drink, James. But that's going to do it. Come back next week for Allison and the season finale. 216pod.com has the links to the Discord. That's the place you want to be, especially when the show is in between seasons. Tons of sports talk going on over there with the Major League Baseball playoffs happening. The freaking Mariners choked it at the end, didn't make the playoffs. Football, both college and pro, is in full swing. Hockey is just around the corner, so is the NBA. And then sometimes we talk about rando. There's a couple rando things that's talked about in the 216 Discord. So come hang out. Lots of good people there. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're everywhere. You leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. That helps. That's going to do it. Come back next week for Allison. Thanks for listening.